Hi, my name is Robin Long, and welcome to the DIY column of the VokTalk newsletter, where we explore how to apply good andragogical practices in our real teaching lives. This month, March 2022, we are going to look at how to use Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel to create an interactive student tracking tool. So, what's an interactive student tracking tool? This is a digital document that we're going to create that allows us to record information about how the student is doing in any one competency or with any one activity, and to share this information with the student in order to leverage their ability to, in order to leverage their engagement and to responsibilize their learning. So we're going to use an Excel document or a Google Sheets document. And the beauty of this is once it's set up, it's something that's very easily accessible in a lab environment. Because the thing is, pieces of paper, we often get them lost in a lab environment, or the lab environment is not conducive because those pieces of paper are going to get dirty, or they're in our workspace and they're not easy to use. And then I have the problem as a teacher is afterwards I have to compile that data, and it adds a lot of extra work onto me. So by using a Google Sheets or an Excel document, we're going to create an easy access document that can be accessed either on a tablet or an iPad or a laptop, and where the data that we're recording is really just little snippets of information, and it's very easy to enter this data. And then what we're going to do is we're going to share this with the student. And so this interactive tool means that as a teacher, I can interact with it because I'm recording the information in a way that's very easy and just gets the essentials, and the student can interact with it because they're going to be looking at the data that's been recorded, and they're going to see a portrait of their learning. So this is an example of a student tracking spreadsheet. Now, the one we're looking at right now is for competency in the professional cooking program called Menu du Jour, which is one of our service competencies. It's one of the later competencies. And what we're looking at then is the spreadsheet for one student. So I would have here at the top, I would have the student's name, and I've divided the spreadsheet up into work that they do online, work they would do in the kitchen, and then assessment down at the bottom. So the different parts of this this tracking tool is I have checkboxes for the work that they had to do online before they were coming into the center. I have here some conditional formatting where once they've done the work and I add a yes or no, it goes green or it doesn't change, so I can see if the work has been done or not. Underneath here, you see the dates that were in the kitchen, so where we're in our service. You can see here where I've added the information as to what position they're working. And then under here where it says teacher assessment, you'll see there's a bunch of drop-down menus. And these drop-down menus have inside them three possibilities: develop, developing, or workforce entry skills. And what these are the assessment of the criteria in the competency. So, for example, one of the criteria in the program of study is they have to be able to set up their service station correctly, which we look right here, proper service setup. And so as the student progresses through the learning of the competency, when they're in the station, if this is what we're looking at, if this is something we want to evaluate that day, then I can watch them and I can observe them during service, or I can get them to assess themselves, and I can record the information by just choosing on the drop-down menu. You'll notice there's a little bit of conditional formatting in here as well, depending on which level they're operating at. It goes green if they're ready to go, if they have workforce ready skills. So if I judge their performance to be at the level that we want for entry level skills, then it goes green. If they're developing, so they're in the process of learning how to do this, but they're making some mistakes, so they may or may not pass an exam at that point. But, at this point, we're just in the learning. It goes yellow, and then, of course, as the student is really having difficulties, then it goes red. And so, as a teacher, I can easily look at this and see how a student is progressing. I also have an area down below where I can add some notes as I feel fit from the work that they were doing. So this is my student tracking. You can see down below actually that there are multiple competencies on the one sheet, and I'll explain that a little bit later why that's the case. Okay, but this is an example of a digital student tracking tool. What makes it really, really interesting is the ability to use it either on a laptop, so you see it's fairly easy to manipulate. So when I'm in a lab situation, it's easy for me just to click on the drop-down menu, pick the one they're doing, add some notes as I see fit. I can just quickly add them in here at the bottom, and I'm done. It's very easy, but it's also really quite easy to do on an iPad or tablet. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so right now, here we are looking at it on the same example, but on an iPad. And as you can see, it's fairly easy for me to access. It's easy for me to pinch and zoom if I want to get closer to what I'm looking at. It's easy for me to access the drop-down menu and just choose the level that I need. And if necessary, I can also access the area to take notes. So you can see that on an iPad, this is actually fairly easy to access as well. The other thing I wanted to point out was that this is one document that's housing multiple students. So for a teacher in a lab situation, it's really easy for me to go through the different students and just go ahead and add my information. I'm not having to open and close a lot of documents. This is all the same document. Okay, so I just want to point out that you can see that as we're going down and looking at these tools, they're slightly different. And I just want to point out, like, depending on the competency that you're in and how you want to set up your tracking tool, it may be that you want to have a list of the competency, the criteria on the left-hand side, and per day, you're going to focus on specific criteria, and you're only going to evaluate those criteria. So your drop-down menu is going to contain the to develop, developing, or workforce ready skills in the drop-down menu, because each line is associated with a criteria. You might have a different kind of competency, which is where this is an example of another kind, where per lesson, I was doing multiple activities, and so I'm focusing per activity, I'm focusing on different criteria. So this is an example of, for example, this is the competency efficient seafood, where I might be making 1, 2, or 3 recipes a day, and I would like the students to focus on different criteria depending on the recipe. So in that case, I've added to my drop-down menu the criteria in the drop-down menu. And I will choose the criteria that we're going to focus on. There's only 9 criteria in total, so I will add all 9, and then depending on what the goal is with that recipe, then I'm going to choose the criteria that we're going to focus on. So we're never going to focus on all 9 at once. Usually in the beginning, it'll be 1 or 2, and then by the end of the competency, you can see here, by the end of the competency, we're doing 3 or 4 different criteria because the student is further along. So depending on the type of competency that you have, you might find that you set up your assessment sheet a little bit differently. So why is this a good andragogical practice? Well, we're really looking at 3 elements. We're looking at, the first thing is it's measurable and applicable. So the tools that we're using with the students, for example, the self-assessment sheets that we write at university, those are great tools because they allow a student to situate their learning where their progression is, and they allow us as a teacher to really focus on, well, what exactly is the student supposed to be able to do in order to meet this criteria. But they're a little bit stagnant in the sense that once that information's been put on those sheets of paper, we don't really do anything with them. So by creating a tool like this, we're able to record that information and make that information available in a way that we can get the student to apply that knowledge to work on their weak spots, know where they need to work a little bit harder, know where they're doing really well, and us as teachers, we're able to intervene early when we see students are having difficulties. It also makes their learning progression visible. So instead of just the teacher giving verbal feedback where they say, yeah, good job, or this needs to be improved a little bit, or this is the result that you want, there's a visible trace of what's going on. So in a document like this, you'll see that when you see a lot of green boxes, well, then the student knows, hey, I'm doing okay, I'm on the right track. And when we see yellow boxes or purple boxes, then we know that there might be some difficulties there. So it makes their learning progression very visible, and it allows them to pick out some patterns as well. So if they see that for example, if it's always an organization thing where they're having difficulties, well, then that's a weak point for them, is organizational skills, and we can focus on where the weakness is and focus on giving the student tools and helping the student develop coping mechanisms for that. And the third part that makes this a really good andragogical practice is that it's participatory. So it's not just I record the information and the information disappears. It's also that we want the students to interact with this information. And so these all touch those core andragogical principles where adult students are interested in applied information. They're motivated, but they're motivated on their own, and they want ideas that are going to solve problems for them. Let's go ahead and make one. Okay, so there's a few steps that we're going to do to make the student tracking tool. Step one, as usual, is our macro planning. We have to look at the big picture. We have to see where our competency is going. Step two is we're going to want to create a descriptive assessment grid or descriptive self-assessment grid. Step three, we are going to want to organize the information on a spreadsheet. Step four, we're going to add conditional formatting, drop-down menus, some formulas. This we can get as elaborate as you please. If you really are good at Excel, you can add all kinds of stuff into this part. I'm just going to show a few simple things that I use. Step five, we're going to add some design elements. So we're going to set up the Excel document so it's visually a little bit more stimulating. And this final step is to share with the students and to ensure that they have access. And I'm going to show you a few different ways to do that, and then the advantages and disadvantages of each. Okay, so my step one is obviously my macro planning. So just like everything else, I have to have a big picture of where my competency is going. So I've shown this before. This is my macro planning sheets are nothing fancy because they're just for me. So I just use a plain old doc, and I put in a couple tables and put in my program of study here. I put in the textbook information that I want, the information for my competency, so the name of the competency, the code, how many hours I have to teach, all that kind of stuff. I highlight in the program of study the criteria that we're focusing on in this competency, because all competencies have a giant list of criteria, but really there's some that are really core to the competency, and so those often are the ones that appear on the exam. So these are the ones I'm going to highlight. I really want to highlight the core of the competency. So that's what those ones are. Okay, so you can see as I go down, each day I have on the left-hand side, I have the objectives of the day. I have the pedagogical activities and how we're going to go about those objectives. I have some review items, and I have the assessment I'm going to use. I have my equipment that I'm going to need, and my recipes that I'm going to need. So I set up my competency. So this is my quick no frills setting up of my competency. That's my macro planning. And this is really key because I'm going to need this in order to make my document. The next step is to create a self-assessment grid or an assessment grid for the teacher. Okay, I use these kind of interchangeably, and it's something that looks like this. So most of you are going to recognize this from university, where we have to do the self-assessment grids and the grids. But these are really crucial to the tracking tool, because I'm not just tracking whether or not the student did a good job or student didn't do a good job. I really want to go after performance based on criteria. Well, what exactly did they not do a good job on? So this is where I want to focus on the criteria. So remember this document from before over here, let's go back up to the top, where we had on our program of study, I had highlighted sort of the core criteria that I wanted to keep for this competency. Well, that's where this is going to come in. So on the left-hand side, I'm going to go after my criteria. And here in the grid, this is where I'm going to put the levels of acquisition. So if we look at something, for example, number 3, which is where we want to look at the correct serving temperature. This is something that's important when I'm cooking fish and seafood. I want to look at the different levels. Well, if I am entry-level skills and I'm ready for the workforce, then I am able to serve the hot food hot, and I'm able to serve cold food cold, and I was able to heat the servingware appropriately. If I'm in the process of learning, well, the food item might have been warm or lukewarm instead of hot or cold, and I might have heated it a little bit or chilled the servingware a little bit, but not enough. And in the case of I'm really at the point where I need to develop this, well, then I served a hot food cold or vice versa, and I didn't even think about my servingware. So that gives you an idea of like the degree of acquisition. And so it's important to do that for every criteria. And I realize like this is a big chunk of the work, but once this is done, then my tracking tool becomes extremely easy. So I go ahead and do this, and in this case I have 9 different criteria I'm going to look at. And something like this, just so you know, I'll give this document to the students, but we use it as a reference document. We rarely will fill out the whole document every single time. And that's what we're going to go look at in the tracking tool. So in the beginning, we'll use this as a reference document, and we'll say, okay, well, these are the 9 things that by the end of the competency, you have to be at the ready for the workforce level. But these are the 9 things that we're going to focus on getting you to get to that level. Okay, so it gives the student a really good idea of what exactly am I going to have to perform to be able to pass this competency. What is entry-level skills for a cook in the competency mise en place of fish and seafood. Okay, but this type of a document is unwieldy in a lab situation. In the case of a kitchen, these students have a workstation, they have food all over the place. We're dealing with stoves and fire because they're gas stoves. We're dealing with food. So having a piece of paper like this is not all that conducive. So we use this as a reference document, but in any given day, based on what I planned in my macro planning here, we're only going to focus on certain things, specific criteria. So, for example, if we look here at day number 4, where we're making shrimp cocktail, well, shrimp cocktail, something that's really important about that is the serving temperature. Nobody wants to eat hot shrimp cocktail, right? We all want nice cold shrimp cocktail. So that would be something where on that day, we're going to the other stuff is also important, but we're really going to focus on this one. Okay? So don't get too scared by seeing a giant document like this. I didn't really use a document this big in every class, okay? Once I've done this assessment grid, so once I've set up how the student is going to understand what the goal of the learning is and how they're able to assess that they're at that goal and how I'm going to assess them if they're at that goal, then I'm going to go ahead and put the information on a spreadsheet. And that's where this comes in. So this is the one that we saw. So this is the one that goes for that document there. And you can see, just like the one you saw before, I have it divided up from the online work and the kitchen work. And what you see down here, this is where I added the drop-down menus on how to, which have the criteria in the drop-down menu. So they're easy to go after. So what it looks like here is it looks like this. All right. So we're going to have to put in this stuff. So I go ahead and I enter my information. So I decide what my online work is. So I'm just going to title this as student tracking test, because I have more than one of these. And now we're going to enter in our information. So we definitely have some work that needs to be done online. And we also we're going to have a few things that are going to be done in the kitchen, right? So we're going to call that, or lab work. How about lab work? So for those of you that aren't cooks, that would make sense. Okay, so we have our online work. We're going to put our dates. So we're going to put lesson 1, okay, and we're going to say that lesson 1 is going to be date as March 24th. And just to make our life easier, let's go ahead and say that we have 5 lessons. They just happen to be all 5 in a row, or you can go in and change the dates as necessary, since we know March 26th is a weekend. So we're going to change this to March 28th. Then this guy gets changed to April 3rd. And this guy gets changed to April 4th. Okay, so we go ahead and set up our classes, our lessons. So we have our 6 lessons there. This is our online work. And so the type of work they're going to have to do, they have, let's say they're going to have to do activity. Then they're going to have some lab work to do. They're going to have activity 1. We'll call it lab to make sure we can differentiate from the online stuff. Activity 2, lab. Okay, so we're kind of setting up our information here. Activity 1, activity 2, and quiz. This activity 1, activity 2, you just want to know if they've done it or not. Okay, so what I would add here is I would add a checkbox. So to add a checkbox, what I would do is I would go ahead and you click on insert and you add a tick box. Okay, so this tick box, then I can just pull over to my other ones, and now I have a bunch of tick boxes. Let's say, for example, I didn't want to have a tick box on the quiz, but I wanted to actually have the information from the quiz. Then on my student sheet, then I could here just enter in the amount, and I would have 3 of 5, right? Oops, mine's on French keyboard. Let's put the in this. So this person got 5 out of 5, right? You could just enter that. Okay. This information then you can compile onto another sheet. Now, the one that we want to look at now is all the work that we did for the assessment sheet. We now want to associate that with the lab work, because that self-assessment sheet, or the assessment sheet, is based on work that they're doing in the kitchen, not based on the learning that they're doing. That's based on their performance. So in that case, then we're going to go back into our document here, and we want to add those in. So we said we had 9 criteria, right, that we were looking at. And so those criteria, we are going to go ahead and add using data validation. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Data, so we're going to be in the cell that we want to be in. I go ahead and click on data, and I go down to data validation. All right, I now get this pop-up window. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm in the cell that I want to be in, but I can also add a whole bunch of cells. So in this case, it's all going to go all the way to cell. I can't see what that says there because it's in the way. Can I move this? Oh, yes, I can. So I'm going to cell G8. G8. So that's great. So we're going to do that. I'm going to change my criteria, and you can see I have different possibilities here. List from a range, list of items, numbers, text, date, tick box, all kinds of stuff. We are going to do a list of items. I'm going to enter these items and separate them by a comma. So my first item is aesthetic presentation. I should spell it right. Presentation. My second item is adequate portion size, so I'm dealing with portion size. My third item that I'm dealing with is correct serving temperature. My fourth item that I'm dealing with is adequate seasoning. Okay, etc., etc., etc. So I'll imagine now that there's 9. I'm not going to enter all 9, okay? Oops, I forgot to add the 4 in front of this. So 4 is correct seasoning. I would add all 9, remembering to put a comma after each one. So you can see here this box, you want to make sure it's checked off. Show drop down in cell, and then save. And now you can see my cells have been populated. So when I click on it, I get my little drop-down menu. So normally, like I said, you would add all 9 criteria in my case, but we get the idea. Now I want to go ahead and put it for my other activity. So all I have to do is highlight this and then get my little plus and pull it down, and it's now there. So yeah, the last thing I wanted to make sure is, so in this case, it's not, I don't want myself just to pronounce how the students are doing. So I don't want them just to rely on my opinion. I want them to self-assess themselves with this. So I'm going to add an extra box here where I want them to do their self-assessment. Assessment. Okay. And in this, I'm going to add a checkbox. Because, in this I'm not going to add a checkbox because I want to add some conditional formatting. I just want to see if they've done it, I want to be able to write Y for yes, and I want it to go green. Okay? So, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just add conditional formatting. We're going to do it across, we're going to take care of all our cells here at the same time. And under tool, under format, I'm going to go to conditional formatting. And in the case of Google, it opens up the side menu. In Excel, it opens up a pop-up right in the middle of your page. And we're going to go ahead and format, where we're going to say the cell contains exactly, and the value we're going to give is Y. Okay. Then we're going to choose the color. We'll use green for now, which is good. We can add another rule. So we could say, you know what? Let's say if they have, we're going to format where text is exactly, let's say the student is absent, and so we don't want to get them mixed up with the students that didn't submit, then I can put A and for absent, and I can give them another color that I'm not going to get mixed up on, and then I hit done. So now that my conditional formatting is in, then what I can do is, you'll see, is if I add my Y to the box, it goes green. Okay. In this case, let's say they were absent on the next day, I add an A and it goes purple because that's the conditional formatting I gave. So very quickly I can see if they're doing their self-assessment or not. Okay, so that would be conditional formatting in that. The next piece we want to see here is going to be, we want to set up the formatting, because this is great and everything. We put all the information into the spreadsheet, but it's really hard to read. And if you saw the other ones over here, well, we had a little bit of formatting. There was a little bit of design element in here, right? So it makes it a little bit easier to read. I realize it's still kind of a giant, crazy document. So for that, we're going to go ahead and we might highlight some stuff. We're going to put stuff in boxes. So for example, I might decide, okay, I want to really differentiate the lab work from the online work. So I'm going to go ahead and make that border highly visible. I'm going to make it bright blue, and I'm going to make it very thick. And I know that that's going to be lab work. I'll go ahead and fill it with a pale blue, and I can see that that separates my lab work from my online work. Let's say I go ahead and I'm gonna put these guys in the middle like this. I'll justify them. And justify these guys as well. Right. I might make this a little bit bigger because, well, it's a little bit hard to read. So maybe not 10. We're going to put this at 12. Same with this kind of stuff here. You know what? Let's go ahead and make that size 14 so I can see it a little bit better. Look at that. We'll make that size 14. This is already starting to come together a little bit better, huh? So we're going to do this. Let's go ahead and maybe I'm going to do a fill here. Well, watch this. I'm going to have to do a fill. We'll do it pale gray. This is going to allow me to, I'm going to have to do this. Fill my guy back up there so I can see the different days more easily. So I will fill this. And really, this is just whatever you want. This is your aesthetic. This is the way you like to set it up because you want to be able to see the information. You want your student to be able to understand the information. But there's no hard and fast way to do this. Okay. Oh, we wanted to have an area for notes as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and make that. What do we had this at 14, right? So 14, maybe we'll separate this out. We'll make a box around this, but we won't make it blue. We're going to make it black. Well, yeah, we can make it black. That's fine. Maybe make it not quite as thick. And we're going to do it per day. So this kind of thing. So you set yourself up. You know, you're going to want to, oops, we're going to add above this, insert a row above. We are going to call this, you know, and then you might want to merge these cells here, as you might want to call this would be the fish and seafood. Competency, so that would be 13. You know, you can put your code here, you can put your student's name here, etc., etc., etc. So you can set it up really however you want it, you know, with the aesthetics that you want. So now I've set this up and each student is going to get their own. So all I'm going to have to do is duplicate, makes a copy. So I rename my duplicate and I rename this to student 1. And I can go ahead and duplicate because once everything's set up, then I just need to make the copies that I want, right? So let's go ahead and rename. So I have 24 competencies. So I make 24 copies of this, but I'm still always working in that same document, right? I'm not making 24 different documents. Okay, so we're going to stop at student 3, but you get the idea, okay? We're going to name this one our master. Rename. Okay, so that I know not to touch this one, and now I have all this. So the final part to this is that we want to be able to share this document with a student. So as you can see from the document here, there's actually multiple pages in multiple sheets in this workbook. I have a sheet per student. I have a sheet for each competency that I'm teaching them. I have my master documents. So there's probably upwards of 40 pages in this document. I only want to share one page with one student. So if I just share the whole document with them, they're going to have access to everything, and I don't want that. So I'm going to use a function in Google called Publish to the Web, and I'm going to be able to share an individual page with an individual student. For Microsoft, there's a little bit of a workaround that you have to do because they don't have that feature available. But I'll show you the Microsoft right after this. So let's take a look at the Google. Okay, so to go ahead and share one sheet of this document with an individual student, what we're going to do is we're going to go under File, and under File, we'll find Share, and we're going to choose the option Publish to the Web. Now at this point, we're only going to use the link function, and we have to make sure that we're not publishing the entire document, we're only publishing one page. So we click on entire document and we select the student that we want to publish. So we'll choose student 1 here. And then once student 1 is selected, then I hit publish. I now have a URL that I can copy. I can have this address that I can copy, and I can now share this address with the student. This is a live link, so whoever I share it with will have access to the document. So I have to be a little bit careful that I'm only sharing it with the student, and I have to tell them this is your link. This is for your private information about your performance. So I can email it. I mean, you can send it by text or by email, however you communicate with your students, but to make it easy access for them, you can also put it in the learning management system. So in this case, it's Google Classroom. And so what I would do is I would create a post in Google Classroom, and I would label it with the student's name, for example, or tracking tool. Let's do that. Student name. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and add the link to the post. And then what's really important here is that I don't choose all students, but I select the name of the student that I want to share it with. So in this case, we'll choose, let's pretend that that's the student, and then I can go ahead and post it. And you'll see when it's posted right here, you can see it's only shared with one student. So even though multiple people have access to this classroom, only the one student is going to see that. When they go ahead and click on it and open it up, they're going to see the document. They cannot interact with the document, so they can't erase anything or do anything to this document. Okay, but the document will update with new information. So as you add information into the original tracking tool here, the source tool, it will update here. So this is a live document. All right. So now in order to share with another student, I'm going to do that same maneuver where I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Share, I'm going to publish to the web. I'm not going to publish the entire document. I'm now going to publish to student 2. I am going to publish. They say, okay, and I now have a new link. So I'm going to copy this link, and I can go ahead and do the same thing I did before. I can create another post, or I can share with them however I want, etc., etc. And I can do this until I've shared every single page with every single student. Okay, so here we are in our OneDrive. So to look at it from a Microsoft Excel point of view, to be able to do that maneuver, to be able to share with the students, we have to do it a little bit differently in OneDrive. OneDrive does not have the ability to publish any document in OneDrive. You don't have the ability to publish to the web like you do in Google. So what you have to do there is you're going to have to, from your large multi-sheet document that you've created, which is here, and I realize that I have some false things here because I didn't transfer over the data formatting, but that's okay. We just pretend these are data, these already have their data validation in there. What we would have to do here is, you can see I have multiple pages here. What I would have to do is I would have to link this page, so the student 1 page, to another Excel document that is just student 1, and then share that with the student. And it's important to link the two documents so that as I'm updating as a teacher, as I'm updating my main document, it's automatically updating the version that the student sees. So in the end, I don't share this document with the student, I just share the one that belongs to their name. So in my OneDrive, I would have my master tracking tool, and then I would have student 1 to 24 with their names underneath. I would stuff those into a folder, and then once they're shared with each student individually, then I don't need to look at them again, because I really am just working out of this document. But in order to do that maneuver, what you have to do is you have to open this document, and you have to open it using the app. You have to open in the app. Don't open it in the browser. So don't open it at Office 365. Open it in the app, which is the downloaded Excel version. I don't have Microsoft Excel, the downloaded version. I only have, my school board only has the Office 365, so I can't do this maneuver. But this is how you would do it. So you would open it in the app. You would open the other document, so student one, the document where you want the information to end up. You would also open that same deal in the app. And then you would just, in the document itself, all you would do is at the top, you would add the formula equals, and then you name the spreadsheet, you paste the name of the spreadsheet, and all that stuff will appear on the page. Just to recap, some of the spreadsheet tips and tricks that we saw were some conditional formatting, where when specific data is present, the cell will change color. We also saw data validation, where that's how we created a drop-down menu in a cell. When we can do different types of drop-down menus, we can also incorporate a calendar. We can do a few different things with data validation. We added a checkbox, so we have a little checkbox that we can use in the cell. We added a hyperlink to a cell so that in the case of having a digital portfolio, we have a cell that's linked out to images. And we added a formula where we compiled the data from one sheet, from a cell, onto a master sheet for me as a teacher. So those are some of the Excel tips and tricks that we used. So that's it for March 2022. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this month's DIY.